déroulé en deux langues, en français et en anglais. Notre principale oratrice est de langue anglaise, mais il y a une traduction et une interprétation simultanée qui se fera en français. Pour ceux qui sont de langue française, qui ne comprennent pas très bien l'anglais, ils ont la possibilité de choisir la langue française quand elle commencera la présentation tout à l'heure sur le processus de proposition des zones clés de la biodiversité et la base des données mondiales des KBA. Elle présentera clairement comment procéder, comment fonctionne la base de données mondiale des KBA, comment soumettre également une proposition. Euh, pour ce webinaire, nous sommes partis pour 1 heure. Nos orateurs ici, ce serait principalement Madame Sam Rudy, qui est KBA Training Officer, qui sera la principale intervenante. Elle sera accompagnée de Monsieur Serge Angali, qui est KBA Regional Point Focal, Focal Point, sorry, for Africa. Ils sont tous deux qui seront là pour nous partager leurs connaissances. Nous voulons déjà nous leur remercier pour leur disponibilité, leur engagement pour ce webinaire. Nous demandons aux participants et participantes de mettre leur microphone vraiment désactivé pendant les présentations. Comme je l'ai dit tout à l'heure, la présentation se fera en langue anglaise et sera traduite en langue française. Mais les questions peuvent être posées dans les deux langues, en français comme en anglais, via le chat ou oralement. Il y aura une session de questions-réponses qui sera organisée à la fin de la présentation. Notre webinaire est assez simple aujourd'hui. Il y aura donc une présentation, comme je l'ai dit, du processus de proposition des KBA avec l'introduction sur les bases de données de la KBA, une démonstration pratique qui sera faite par Madame Sanwidi. Et par la suite, donc, on aura des questions, une session de questions-réponses. Now, to help Sanwidi, just an introduction for our webinar. Now we have the honor and pleasure to introduce this webinar. Mrs. Samriti is a
Madame
KBA
Samedi,
training officer
qui
who has
est
organized a
formatrice
training and
KBA, qui a
support on the
reçu une
KBA
formation
process,
sur les processus de
particularly
KBA,
with regard to the core
surtout en
database
ce
of
qui
KBA
concerne
and
la
solution
base de données
mechanism.
mondiale.
She will be accompanied by Mr. Serge Angali. Serge Angali is a KBA regional focal point for Africa. Who will provide additional insight, particularly on the African context. Mrs. Sanriji, without further ado, you have the floor to give us your presentation. After the presentation, we have a question in French or in English. Mr. Angali can explain the answer in French or English. You can also add your add add answer in the question in English, because we have a Rita can translate all your presentation in French. Okay, we have a floor. Thank you.
That sounds great. Thank you, Christelle, for, and I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly, for your introduction. And yeah, I think I'm just gonna go ahead and get started pretty much immediately. In terms of videos, I noticed that everyone has their videos off. That's totally fine because we'll be looking at my screen anyway. But feel free if you want to raise your hand or have questions, if you want to make comments, then I'm okay with you using the chat to ask your questions or to just raise your hand via the React button. And then I'll get to you. Serge, it might help if you keep track of who's raised their, not be able to keep track of who's raised their hands when.
I think that we can just go ahead for the presentation, and then at the end of the presentation, we can take all questions.
Okay. All right, that works as well. I am gonna share screen. So my entire screen. So I think Serge had mentioned that you guys have already been through the WDKBA website on how to register. So I'm not going to go over that today. Before we actually start this presentation, I just want to present on how to what sort of information we're and see how this information is put in and where these information is put in.
Essas informations.
So to begin with, we
Alors
have
pour
a couple
commencer,
of text fields that
nous
are going to appear in the KBA fact sheet related to the site. So what this means is when you are writing these text fields, try not to use very technical language because the general audience is basically anyone who has internet connection who would be able to get access to the KBA website and the KBA fact sheet. What we're looking for is just an overview of the site, so someone who's never been there. The sort of information that we're looking for, and these are optional. Not all of these will be relevant to all the sites, but it's just the basic type of information that we're looking for. So the first is the general location. Where within the country is it located? You don't need to provide very accurate description of like it's like this longitude, latitude, not that sort of information. Just generally, it's found in this province or this state, in the northeast corner of this state or province, or just something like that. And then some general description. So is it hilly? Is it flatlands? Is it coastal? Is it marine? Stuff like that. And then biome or some biological or components like the key vegetation and some key animal species that may be found at that site, and some non-biological components like the topography, elevation range, and information like that. If you have information, you can also provide some details about the climatic and general weather patterns. So this could be in terms of what if you have dry and wet climate patterns, then you just mention like, what the range of rainfall may be during the wet season versus the dry season, information like that. And then the activities of the site. So is it a place where tourists go? Is it a remote location? Is it a national park? That sort of information, potentially. Oh. And then the rationale for KBA identification is basically a snapshot of why this site is important. So what we're saying is, in as few sentences as possible, describe which trigger elements meet which KBA criteria at the site. So if you have a site where there are only 3 trigger elements, one, let's say bird, and 2 animals, then you might say the common name and or the scientific name of the bird triggers whichever KBA criteria, and 2 mammal species, A and B, trigger criteria B1 and B3B. For instance, just something short and simple like that. You don't need to provide too much site meet the KBA criteria or what the site. You can mention some of the other species that may be present at the site regarded as sensitive. So we're trying not to really publicize that, especially the case if it is being actively hunted, either illegally or I guess legally as well. If you think it's sensitive. If there are KBA criteria, then you can actually trigger KBA status. So from the very beginning, they've already made references to B1 and A1, or B and A. And then they've actually gone on to explain which species meets which criteria. So the critically endangered Inago pygmy chameleon triggers criterion A1 and A1E, while two other reptiles trigger criterion B1. In addition, there is one endangered amphibian that triggers criterion A1A and A1E, and three which KBA criteria, but they don't actually list out each of the species that trigger the criteria. And then manageability. So essentially, who is responsible for managing this site? Some questions that you may need to consider regarding the management of the KBAs actually be made. So steps and actually implement actions at the site. The decision making, then what is the understanding between them about this site and its KBA status? Managed by the traditional chiefs of the village around the reserve in collaboration with the Institut Congolais pour la, sorry about my pronunciation, for la Conservation de la Nature, ICCN. A public-private partnership has been given to the international NGO Wildlife Conservation Society to manage the site with ICCN and the local community. So this is a very good example of manageability because it mentions all the actors and it mentions how decisions would be made. In this particular case, it's a public-private partnership, and WCS is mostly responsible for managing the site, but in collaboration with ICCN and the local community. So they will have to conservation actions as such. And then next we have an acceptable example. So I have basically blacked out the potentially not sensitive, but like identifying information. But essentially it just says this KBA could be managed by this agency because it has the capacity to establish regional conservation areas. So in the first example, it's an example of how is the site being managed. The second text is describing the potential for manageability at the site. Because for manageability, we're not saying it has to be currently managed somehow, but it needs to have the potential for manageability. And then delineation. So here you just describe why, basically, you chose this particular boundary for the site. So in this example, you can see the blue-green boundary around this area. This is not a real site. I just made it up for example purposes. So none of these, the site, there are 3 trigger elements, let's say. And the yellow boundary is the ecological boundary of the 4 trigger elements. So to begin the delineation, this site was delineated to include most of the ecological boundary of the 4 trigger elements. And then you provide a bit more detail. So the boundary differentiates between the agricultural land, which is where the trigger elements are mostly found. And the boundary also then follows the road along the ridge of the mountain. So yeah, that's basically what this one says as well. The boundary, again, follows the road on this side, and then the ridge of the mountain on this side. So with those key topological features and mention of the ecological boundary of the species, you essentially have a complete delineation rationale. So again, here are a couple of different examples. Sorry, I need to cough a bit. So the first example is, delimited based on species records and suggestions during KBA workshops, aiming to include habitat and natural or adequate limits to ensure the functionality of the species that trigger the KBA. So essentially, all this is saying is logical boundary of the species. And then practically surrounded by the historical deforestation caused by agriculture, meat and dairy industry, including meat and dairy industry, including cattle pasture lands in this area. However, on the west, the limits it limits with Santo Domingo City and small villages and towns. On southeast, the limits with this ecological reserve on its southern section. On east, the montane and subtropical forest remnants of this province. So it's providing a very clear description of what considerations were made to come up with that particular boundary for that particular site. Yeah, or it can be something as simple as site delineation follows the exact boundaries of the protected area. That is great, because it also has implications for manageability as well. And then the third example is actually where the delineation was based on the Veredal boundaries, which is the smallest administrative territorial division category. So in the third example, it was the country-level administrative decision that led to the delineation of the site, rather than strictly speaking the ecological boundaries of the site. But of course, they all obviously took into consideration the ecological boundary as well. So those are just a couple of different examples of the types of text you can include and the types of examples that you can give for why you're selecting that particular boundary. I know that this is a reassessment, so most of the sites are going to come with their current boundaries, in which case we would recommend that you either consult the relevant people to see what their rationale for the delineation was, or if you don't actually know why they did it, then we don't actually know the rationale behind the delineation of this particular boundary. But we're just following the previous people, essentially. And then in addition to those, there are also some justifications. And this is in case of documentation of reproductive units. I'm sure you guys still remember about reproductive units, but what we're asking for when we ask about reproductive units is it can be published report or papers of with estimates of numbers of the particular species, or it could just be expert knowledge as well. But in this case, if you are using expert knowledge, then we do ask that you provide the name of the expert with their email address in case a follow-up is required. So again, when you are confirming the number of reproductive units, we don't actually need the exact numbers, but we do ask that you confirm that there is at least 10 or 5 reproductive units to at least meet the threshold. And you can use any of these types of sources. So either visits to sites where you've actually seen the number of mature individuals that meet or exceed the threshold. You can use tracking data sets that indicate that the number of mature individuals using the site meets or exceeds this threshold, or indirect evidence. So for instance, active nests or breeding burrows that indicate that at least the threshold number of reproductive units is likely to be present at the site. So, and then once you have confirmed the reproductive units threshold, you also need to define 10 RUs for this species. So here we're basically trying to make sure that we both understand what is considered 10 reproductive units for this species to make sure that the minimum number of reproductive units in data that you provide is consistent both in your minds and in our minds. So you might say like 10 family groups of the species where only the alpha male and alpha female tend to breed with each other, or yeah, something along that line, potentially for wolves or for the African dogs as well. If it's not an obvious type of reproductive strategy, then it would be great if you could provide a bit more information to provide the context for the species. So for instance, this one is a plant species. So mentioning wind-pollinated species, 10 females and 1 male within a distance of however many meters, provides us with very clear idea of what counts as, well, 10 reproductive units. And so whatever number you've provided, there's like, okay, at least 11, 10 females and 1 male are within 10 meters of each other or 5 meters of each other. And then again, the last one is also plants, 10 adult hermaphrodite plants. So they can self-fertilize themselves. So you only need 10 mature individuals. That's great. Yeah. And then there is the justification for criterion D for aggregations. Again, this is just to make sure that we are applying, or you are applying the you understand what we mean by aggregations and you're applying it accurately. because we specifically asked that aggregations be 1 to 2 orders of magnitudes of or greater orders of magnitude of like densities. So if the species is just a bit more densely packed, then that might not be enough. You need to kind of demonstrate that it's not that they are limiting their space a bit more because they just don't have a lot of space. It's actually about the species is actually forming an aggregation in that area. And then for specific types of use of data, for instance, when the IUCN range map exists and you're using localities data instead of the IUCN range map, then we recommend that you provide a bit of a justification for why you're using localities data in the additional information section within the global estimates. So it could just, well, this is a very good example. Populations are considered distinct if they are separated by more than 6 kilometers and or geographic barriers are present. The cactus expert, name and email, cited a range for this particular species created in 2013 was not used because it is not realistic and requires updating. So I'm not sure how much you remember of what Serge mentioned. In the training, it's considered old data. You can still use it when you are proposing in this case, they're saying because the range data is old, we're using the data that the expert has, which is localities-based data. Yeah. So additionally, the expert. All collections to ensure that the localities adequately represent the distribution of the species. Furthermore, the species is not abundant where it occurs and is patchily distributed. And so here they are actually referencing some of the text in the IUCN assessment as well. So yeah, we just have a few more examples of different types of justifications. So example explanation for why you're not using IUCN range red list estimates. Again, the global population of this species is more than 3 times higher than what is reported on the red list. This site contains 15% of the global mature individuals, and then citation. We developed estimate with the help of expert, and the data and results have been uploaded in the document titled this in the About tab. Global population from the red list needs to be updated. So like earlier, this is a very well-written description or justification for why they're not using the IUCN red list. Yeah, and then here, the second example is why you would expect that the species is still at the site, even though the presence data is outdated. So in some cases, you will come across situations where the data that you are using for the species is going to be more than 12 years old, and the evidence of presence data that you provide is also going to be more than 12 years old. In that case, you will need to provide additional justification for why you expect the species to still be present at the site. And here we have an example explanation. Registered at the site in 2010, so definitely outdated data. Expert name, email, who is an expert in butterfly distribution is confident that the species is still present and over 80%. According to expert name, the reason that the species hasn't been registered at the site since 2010 is because no research has been conducted at the site, and therefore no one has looked to register the species at the site. So again, this is a very full, complete description of why you expect the species to still be present at the site, even though it hasn't been seen at the site for the last 16 years. And then we've already covered defined 10 RUs, but yeah, here's another example. So the unicorn bird is pair bonding species, and therefore 10 reproductive units would require 10 mature males and 10 mature females or 10 active nests. Yeah, and then this is essentially just that you completed all of these before submitting the proposal. It is partially redundant because if you don't provide all the information in the WDKBA, you will not actually be able to submit the proposal. But yeah, make sure that all the required documentation is complete, is accurate and precise, correct. All people cited have agreed to have their names and contact details stored securely in the WDKBA. This is going to be very important. And all people who provided information have agreed to it being published in the WDKBA. So that's it in terms of just a quick overview. Now I'm actually going to your sites. You will not need to click on add new site. You will just need to create a short list and select a site to reassess. Okay, I don't know how many species there are in this. So in that case, I am using the UAT site, which is why I will start assessing biodiversity. So the site ID is automatically, because it's an old site, it's just this is the site ID. The site name, there's the national name and the international name. You can change these if you would like. If you do end up changing the site names, then please mention it in the site description. So, as you can see, site description already has some sort of you want to if you need to, and double check that all the information here is accurate. It's possible that because this was 2001, that the map might actually need updating. It might be a very rough map, so it might need to be a bit more, it might need to be made a bit more precise. But I cannot see the site. Okay, it's coming. It's just very slow. Okay. Okay, let's hope that it's gonna be a bit faster in a bit. Here versus in the maps site. Because this is a 2001 site, application has very general text. So you would need to update this to actually mention which KBA species or which criteria, which species and or ecosystem actually meets which KBA criteria. For any species, you would want to actually highlight, but that do not meet the KBA criteria, sure that that information is accurate and updated to make sure that there isn't double the information in both of these fields. Yeah, if the site has any specific values specifically related to indigenous groups or groups that will have customary rights at the site, then you can mention it in the site values. Manageability is another text field that I had just gone over. Basically, you describe how the site is being managed or how the site could potentially be managed if needed. I don't think you're going to be changing the boundary of the sites that much. It's just a reassessment, so you will not be needing to supersede sites. If you do want to supersede sites, then we can talk about it later. Again, we've already gone over delineation, so I'm gonna just skip that. And then protected or conserved area. Here, you just need to identify what percentage of the site, what percentage band of the site is covered by the protected area or by the OECM at the site. And then if there is some coverage, then you will need to mention it in this text. Ideally, you would provide a bit more information than just the name. Ideally, you would also include the WDPA reference number as well. And again, if you would like to provide a bit more accurately calculated protected area coverage or OECM coverage, then you can do so after selecting the appropriate band. And then habitats and land use, you'll just need to provide, there are 2 or 3 levels where you select which habitat type is present at the site, and then a short list of what type of shrubland that is, and then what percentage is present at the site. This percentage, you don't need to go into too much detail, so you don't need to provide the habitats that are like 0.001% of the habitat is that particular habitat. That's fine. We're basically just making sure that the major habitat types are identified rather than like all the habitat types that are actually present at the site. And because of the percentage in site, please make sure that it does actually add up. So there's 80% and there is 19%, so 1% is missing. And it's not really that much of a big deal, but it could get the proposal sent back because the numbers aren't adding up. So is 1% a different type of habitat, or should it be 81, 19, or 20 and 80? And then based on the selections that you've made, you can very briefly provide a general habitat description and general land use description as well. Both of these fields are optional, so it's up to you. If you provide information here, they will appear in the KBA fact sheet. I don't know if you have actually seen the KBA fact sheet. What is the... There you go. So that is the type of, that is the area where the information will show up. There are two buttons, site details and assessment, site overview. It provides the list of KBA criteria, when it was last assessed, national name, the central coordinates, the area, protected area coverage, KBA classification, is it a legacy site? So again, because yours is a reassessment, it will always be yes. And you can see here, site detail description, rationale for qualifying as a KBA, additional biodiversity, manageability of the site, other site values, delineation rationale, and some information about the type of habitat present at the site and the threats present at the site, and some additional information. So who actually provided information about that was used in this site. And similar in the assessment details, you'll actually see which KBA, which species triggered which KBA criteria. Yeah, I just wanted to go over that, yeah. And then pressures, again, this is expected to be a relatively general description, and again, it's optional. If you have any additional information that you would like to add, then feel free to add it in the additional information section. The references that you used in this page would ideally go here in the references section. And the contributors. So this is a place where you list the names of everyone who, or the relevant people who provided data that helped you reassess this site. It will be made public on the KBA website. So that means that you will need to ideally provide the list of people's names and then, if relevant, their institution, but do not provide their contact details in this field. Okay. I'm gonna skip the map page for right now because I don't know if it's working properly right now. I'll come back to it at the end. The About proposal is basically, what is this proposal about? So there's the drop-down menu. You are not proposing a new KBA, so you can ignore these two. You are reassessing an existing KBA. So are you, so which of these four options are you actually doing? Are you actually trying to just reassess the current biodiversity elements listed in the site and that's it? Are you reassessing an existing KBA by adding some extra biodiversity elements, but not actually reassessing the existing species? Are you reassessing both the existing information and adding new species or ecosystems? Or finally, are you reassessing the site to actually disqualify all the biodiversity elements that exist at the site? And then finally, at the end of that process, if the site does not have any KBA triggers, then we would be delisting the site. Once you've selected whichever option, I'm assuming that in most cases it is going to be reassessing additional elements. In most cases, it probably will be this. In that case, we also recommend that you add a bit more information about the nature of the proposal. So again, just to reiterate that it is a reassessment where you are providing some of the missing information in the site details tab, and that you are also providing an updated information on existing additional species in different taxonomic groups. So you could mention like, and proposing additional plant species or mammal species or amphibians, whatever. Which of these you think are, which of these you're actually planning on applying? So are you applying A1 or A2? Any of the B criteria? Are you applying criterion C, D, or E? And so any of the information that you're providing in any of these map or about or pressures actions or material. This, once the site has been confirmed, the information that you've uploaded here might still be viewable. Sorry, I don't know why my throat is feeling very scratchy. So once you've uploaded the information on here, once the site has been confirmed, the information might still be present at this site. So if someone were to reassess the site, then they might still be able to access some of the information here. So please do not add any information or any materials related to your the trigger elements in this page. You will be able to upload those documents in the assessment tab itself. And then there are a few consultation fields. So biodiversity knowledge holders. Who are some of the biodiversity knowledge holders that you consulted? How did you consult them? Did you have trainings, or sorry, not trainings, did you have workshops with the different taxonomic groups? How did you actually consult the biodiversity knowledge holders about species at the site? Previous proposers, how did you consult with them? Did you consult with them if you are changing the boundary, if you're updating the boundary, then you will need to talk to previous proposers. If you are not updating the boundary, then it's not mandatory, but it is recommended. And government describe basically the consultations with relevant government authorities at the national or local levels, and customary or legal rights holders. So yeah, again, describe how you consulted with the customary or legal rights holders if you did. These fields are not optional. So if you did not end up talking to previous proposers, then just explain that because we didn't actually change the boundary, we didn't end up consulting with previous proposers or something along that line. Contributors to this assessment. So in this field, we're actually just asking you for information about who provided information for this particular assessment of the site. It is different to the contributors field here, because this is a field where you will always be adding information. So every reassessment, this field should remain untouched, or like, you shouldn't delete anything in this field. You just keep adding information to this field. But in this particular field, when you are doing a reassessment, you will delete the previous information that was here and add new information here. So that's the difference between the contributors in the site details and contributors to this assessment in the About page. And reviewers, yeah, if you have any idea of the independent reviewers who you think could help, or help as in make comments on this assessment, then please provide their names and contact details. Again, it is optional. They do need to be independent, so people who have been consulted or who are co-proposers in this proposal cannot be reviewers. They would have to be completely separate people. Okay. And then the assessment. So if you want to add new trigger elements, then you just start typing their scientific name. And you will eventually be able to make the appropriate choice. And then you click add species and you'll get the same information, or you'll get the pop-up that is very similar to the pop-up in the existing triggers list. So you'll notice that here there's a date and time. So this is essentially the date and time that this particular species was last assessed. So this one, we've just gone for the default of January 1st, 2001, 12 a.m. because we don't actually know exactly when it was in 2001. So just to make our lives easier, we just said that's going to be the date for all 2001 assessments. When you click reassess, this time will get updated. So right. There are a few fields that will be grayed out. As you can see, you cannot actually make any changes in these grayed out fields. And you can just go to the assessment section to provide the relevant details about the assessment parameter. So here you just select whichever assessment parameter you have the best available data for at both the global and site levels. I'm going to go for number of mature individuals just because I want to show you a couple of things. So right now we have a bug in the system. You saw when I selected the number of mature individuals assessment parameter, there is a copy of the information essentially. What we recommend is that you delete the first one, just delete it, and then start working on the second one. So the assessment parameter is still the same, number of mature individuals, and then you actually start providing the information. Probably should have done range, but yeah. Provide the relevant information. I don't actually have information about this species, so I'm just going to say best global is that. And then in the source, you would actually need to reference the paper or a UCN website for the species, or basically any other reputable website or publication that you have access to.
Sorry,
Yeah.
Edie.
Yeah.
I just wanted to know how many minutes you will need to finish because you know we have some question, we have a time of question, and I want to know.
Yeah, if I can finish the site estimates, then probably I will need like 10 more minutes and then I can, we're very close, basically.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. If you are using localities as an assessment parameter, then again, this is the section, additional information, where you would provide the justification for using the localities data. And then in the site estimates, you will need to provide the year for the information of the species at the site. If you have a range, then you can use year min and year max. If you only have 1 year, then you can just fill in year min. Again, there's the best site information. If you have multiple years of data, then you can put in min site, max site, and then divide it by 2 to provide the best site data. Source is exactly the same as the global, where you just need to provide a reference and or the reputable website or an in-country publication that you can point to. In that case, ideally, we do ask that you upload that information, the PDF, onto the page as well. You would be able to provide it after you click reassess or cancel. Okay. Derivation of estimate is just a drop-down menu. You'll have to pick whichever one is relevant. So evidence of presence and year of presence. So even though your min data may be more than 12 years old, the evidence of presence may actually be more recent. So year of presence could be as recent as just yesterday to all the way, 50 years ago, depending on the species. So you just need to elaborate on the evidence of presence. So who, what, where, when, how. So who saw the species? When did they see the species? Where did they see this species? Ideally, where within the site, but where is a bit more iffy. And how did they record the presence of the species? So as in what is the record of the presence of the species? Was it something that happened during a survey of the species or of other species, and then the lead researcher saw the species there as well? Is it someone who uploaded it in GBIF? Things like that. We've already sort of talked about minimum number of reproductive units. Source of reproductive units data is similar. So where did you get the 10 or the confirmation of the minimum number of reproductive units? Was it an expert saying, yes, there are 10 reproductive units because I saw them? Or was it, I'm guessing that there are, or I'm estimating that there are at least 10 reproductive units because of intact habitat and other reasons like that. Define 10 are used for the species. We've already been through that. Nature of occurrence. Please, please, please do not forget to select the appropriate nature of occurrence, because this is what ensures that the criteria met, that the actual criteria that you're trying to apply is applied to the species. Yeah. If you have selected D1, then the justification is no longer labeled as optional, so you will need to provide information. If you select just B1, then justification will appear to be optional again. And this is just the source for the justification. If it's a sensitive species, then make sure that you click the button and provide a bit more detail about the species. If you are trying to delist a species, then you will need to click on qualifies, because you're saying this species does not qualify, and then mention why it does not qualify. So there is a KBA criteria revision, so it does not qualify as a trigger anymore. If you are disqualifying a species, then you do not need to provide all of this information, of course. Yes, cancel. So that, okay. Reassess. So that is it. You can notice here that the date and time has changed. I'm assuming that you're only doing species. You can provide some information about conservation actions at the site and the pressures. It follows the IUCN criteria list. So here is the criteria met tab. As you provide information in the assessment tab for the relevant species, this list will get updated. So assessment parameter. The assessment parameter will get updated, and the reproductive units percent in the site, and the KBA criteria that it meets will be updated. So yeah, as you can see, I had done this species, and the assessment parameter is number of mature individuals, and obviously I did not put any information in, so it's 0%, and no reproductive units, no KBA criteria. That is essentially it. Oh, sorry, finally, just one thing. If you want to invite co-proposers to the proposal to help you do the reassessment, then you can click on this and then enter their email address. But make sure that the email address that you write down here is the email address that they have signed up to the WDKBA with, because otherwise you will not be able to send them the invite. Okay, that is it.
Okay, thank you very much, Izzy, for your excellent presentation. And now we are going to start with question. Vraiment désolé pour la longueur, mais c'était vraiment important. Nous allons commencer les questions là maintenant. On va aller sur une série de 3 questions. Vous levez la main, vous présentez, vous posez directement votre question de manière concise. Et si la question est en français, Serge Ngali peut rapidement répondre. Et si c'est en anglais, je crois que somebody can answer a question if the question is in English. Ok, je vois la main d'Angéline qui est levée. Angéline, tu as la parole.
Okay, Christelle, thank you for giving me the floor. Thank you also to Samiji for this presentation on submitting the proposal. The time is too short, so I have only question to ask. My first question to Samiji is to know, I want to know if we necessarily have to go through the NDC to submit a proposal, or an independent person can also submit, because it was the subject of a lot of discussion during the last training here in Yaoundé, facilitated by Serge. And if an independent person can submit a proposal, how is the accuracy of data is ensured? The second question is to know, in case of reassessing an existing KBA, as it will be the case for the 38 KBA of Cameroon, according to you, what could be the main challenges that we can face during this reassessing of the existing KBA? Because sometimes we face the challenges related to gap in data, sometimes the governance issue, and also sometimes the stakeholder alignment with the KBA issue. So I want you to share your experience in facing challenges for the reassessing of existing KBA. Thank you.
Okay,
thank you for your
Jenny.
question. Yeah.
Yes, you are. Okay, somebody you can answer because I don't see another hand.
Okay.
You can give an answer. I
Angeline
think that Serge.
I'm Angeline from FODER. I forgot to introduce myself. I'm Angeline Mojo. I work here in FODER as project manager. I'm forester.
Okay.
Thank you, Angeline. Somebody you can answer after your answer. We will take another participant before their question.
Okay, that sounds good. So in terms of independent versus NCG, you don't need to be an national coordination group member to be able to propose a KBA. But if so you can, as an individual proposer, propose KBAs as well within your country of interest. However, if the country does have an existing NCG, then it will need to go through the, ideally it would need to be approved by the NCG of the country before it comes to the regional focal point, just to make sure that the NCG members of the country are aware of the proposal as well. And if they have any recommendations, like changing the boundary a bit, then they can make those sorts of recommendations, and they can work together before it comes to the regional focal point. I forgot the second part of your question, of that particular question.
If just I can mention something back to the first question. Last time where we were in Cameroon, we said that the need for the Cameroon NCG want that all KBAs be proposed by the National Coordination Group. Even though an individual person wants to propose it, they need to refer to National Coordination Group before to propose their site. That was said, and I think it was mentioned in the term of the reference that they are going to submit it soon.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, the second question was about which type of challenge can you face when you are making reassessment? I think.
In terms of the main challenges, it's basically, I think you mentioned it as well, it's basically in terms of data. So some of the issues that we've seen in some of the other countries is challenges with actually getting good justifications, which is why I spent a lot of time in the first half just going over the different ways that you can write justifications in different fields. And 10 reproductive units, define 10 reproductive units for the species is a field that people do find very difficult. And sometimes it is because the reproductive strategy of the species has not actually been studied. So it is very difficult to say how many mature individuals are actually required. But in that case, we recommend that you be more conservative. And if you don't really know, then just say, okay, well, let's go with 10 males and 10 females, because whatever the mating strategy, in most cases, that will ensure that 10 reproductive units are met. The other challenge is evidence of presence, especially in national parks, especially with some cryptic species. Sometimes, as you saw in one of my justifications, it's been decades since the species was actually studied. So there is no would you provide justification for why you think the species is still at the site. That's when those types of justifications become incredibly important. Because if you have data, if you've literally studied the species in 2023, 2024, and you've seen the species more recently, like this year when you went out for a walk, then that's very easy. But how do you actually make the case for a species that is not as well studied? That is one of the main challenges that I think we've come across, that we've seen other countries deal with as well.
Okay, thank you, Edie, for this clarification. Now I see Serge Kamgaoura, the hands up. Serge, tu peux poser ta question et on va t'apporter les réponses.
Okay.
Allô?
Merci beaucoup. Thank you, Rajal, for your insightful presentation. So I'm going to ask like two questions, but because the third question, you have already give some explanation for that. The first question, I'm asking, based on your experience, what could be the time frame for the assessment? How long it can take? That's the first question, based on your experience. How long it can take to fulfill the full reassessment of a KBA in a given area or country? The second question, actually, what could be the validation chain? Since following your presentation, it is possible that during the assessment, we change the boundary.
Yeah.
In the context of Cameroon, changing the boundary, it can be sometimes really difficult because it involves many stakeholders, and sometimes agreeing the boundary take a lot of time, a lot of procedure. So how we can deal with that? And the third question actually is about the NCG. what could be their skills in a context where we don't have like existing database. If we don't have existing database, it will be very, very difficult to make the reassessment. What can you advise as a procedure to gather accurate data to be able to assess a KBA in a given country, like in Cameroon? Thank you so much.
Thank you, Serge. We don't have another question. You can answer with Idi and Serge.
Okay, so those are all extremely important questions. In terms of the first question, in terms of time frame, how long does it take? It does depend on how quickly information can be gathered from the experts.
Yeah.
And how quickly information is uploaded and what the turnaround period is. So for instance, like I am I'm the acting regional focal point for Asia. And there is a country where I gave a training in 2023, late 2023, and they are just now actually putting in the information and I am finally starting to review the sites in details now.
Okay.
So in that case, like it took a really long time, but they did do a full comprehensive assessment of KBAs in the country. They've had to gather a lot of expert information, but okay, so this is related to the third question.
First question.
Yeah. Let me just finish the second question. In terms of boundary change, well, okay, fine. They're all related. In terms of boundary change as well, it can take a long time, and that is why like we recommend you going through the national coordination group, because the point is like with the national coordination group that you would actually have relevant experts and relevant individuals from different departments and from different agencies to be part of the national coordination group, not just taxonomic experts. So you'd have like government officials, you'd have ideally representatives from indigenous communities and so on. What this can mean is that when you are potentially changing boundaries, then the government officials who are part of the NCG can then have informal discussions with their departments and get the clearance required to actually fast track that process. So you can do it partially like semi-informally as well, if people are included in the NCG. The other thing is with the boundary change specifically, ideally everyone would be in agreement with the boundary change, and ideally, as you mentioned, all the relevant stakeholders would be consulted, but that can take a very long time. So we do recognize that, and we do ask that the key players who need to be consulted when the boundary is being changed is the previous proposers. So the first thing that you'd need to do is just figure out who the previous proposers are, and then and then have a consultation with them to actually make changes to the boundary. Like I mentioned, ideally you would do a broader consultation, but if that's not possible, then that is acceptable. And like we do recognize that that's not always going to be possible. The key idea is that KBAs are a scientific designation. They do not have any management prescribed to them. So just because a site is a KBA, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to actually affect the actual management of the site as such. It's just we recommend that, or we ask that the site is manageable or potentially manageable, because that way we can ensure the longevity of the site being a KBA for those species, because the site and the species have a chance of being actively managed to continue being at the site.
Okay.
In terms of the NCG, like you mentioned, no existing database. That is one of the key challenges, which is why it can take a long period of time. If you have taxonomic experts from different, obviously from different taxonomic groups, then one of the ways that you could try to fast track the process is by asking that they be co-proposers for the relevant sites that they have data related to the species, and they would be the ones who would input the data directly into the WDKBA. So even though there is no actual existing database, the fact that you're inviting them to provide data directly means that you're bypassing the need to create a central database. So yeah, that would be my suggestion. Serge, do you have any additional feedback or points you'd like to make as well?
I don't have anything. I think that is enough that as you presented it.
Okay. Okay,
Yes,
thank you,
thank you so
Serge.
much. If you can allow me to just, based on the last point about the availability of data, within the process, do you have any way maybe to put together like stakeholder in the level of the country to share data they may have? Maybe organize like a workshop, I don't know, or another webinar to assess in the stakeholders, NGOs, researcher, to make sure that what are the data we have in the level of the country concerning those different KBA before following the next step.
Yeah, for sure. There are cases of some other countries organizing taxonomic group specific workshops to actually talk about all the different species in that taxonomic group and where are they, how much in which KBA and stuff like that. The main reason I didn't really talk about that go in too much detail about that is because we found that some people are very reluctant to share data. So they might be okay with providing data directly in the WDKBA, but they might not necessarily want to actually be engaged in workshops where they're going to have to potentially provide all of their data.
That's true.
But it is very like context specific. So if you think a workshop would work better, then that is definitely the approach that I would recommend taking.
Okay, thank you, Serge. Thank you, Idi, for this clarification. I didn't see another hands up. I think that we can close our webinar. Ladies and gentlemen, I think that we have come to the end of this webinar. I would like to sincerely thank Mr. Samwidi and Mr. Serge Angali for their excellent presentation and also clarification. My thanks also go to BERLAF International for its technical support to FODER for organizing this session. I think that this webinar is an important step in strengthening our capacity to identify and to manage key biodiversity area in Cameroon. And thank you for your attention and for the quality of the discussion during this webinar. We will send to all the participants the video of the record of this webinar. After the webinar, we will send the record. And thank you very much once more. I think that our webmaster take a picture. I just wanted to wish you a wonderful end of the day.
And
Thank you.
I listen so much.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much
have a good
for
day.
all
Bye-bye.
your attention as well, because we are very much over time. So I really appreciate your patience as well.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Have a good day. Take care.
Bye.